I'm gonna sit down in my very comfy red Bernina chair. And by the way, we have those in stock right now. And we're gonna show you how to do a buttonhole. Now, I'm gonna tell you about doing this buttonhole is that the first thing you should do when you do a buttonhole is you should interface the area that the buttonholes are in. Now, look at this gorgeous dress that Kayla made. I'm pretty certain there's over 20 buttonholes on that. That would be really intimidating for a lot of people, and I can understand why. I have had different sewing machines over the years that when I would sit down to do a buttonhole, I would do one, and then I'd do the second one, and they would not turn out the same. And then I'd be trying to rip out the buttonhole, and if you've ever tried to rip out a buttonhole, the stitches are really close together. It's really easy to damage your fabric, and it's a pain. So what I always tell people to do is take a scrap of the actual fabric of the garment or the project you're working on, the actual fabric, and make yourself a test sample. And in this case, we are going to, excuse me. So, we are going to take a piece of just black cotton, and we've put a piece of interfacing in here. And notice that this is a probably 1.5 inch wide strip of interfacing. Now this is a woven interfacing, and what I will point out to you is you should probably test a couple of different interfacings to see what works better. So this one's woven, and here we carry knit interfacing also. I kind of like the knit interfacing a little bit better. So the knit interfacing is very lightweight, but it will give you the stability you need under a buttonhole. The problem with most people doing buttonholes is they try to do a buttonhole without putting any kind of stabilizer under them. And what ends up happening is the stitching doesn't look very good because it doesn't have anything it'll curl up the fabric, it will make it wavy, it's just not very attractive. So what I oftentimes do, and by the way, this is 1 inch wide knit interfacing in white. We carry it in white and black, and we carry a 2 inch wide knit interfacing in white and black. So what you can do is you can go ahead and just buy that by the yard, and then anytime you're doing a strip of buttonholes like we did here on this dress, you can run that down the whole length of that area. And that's kind of the idea of what I did here. And these are fusible. You can also use a woven, for example, if I were at home and it's 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm still sewing for some crazy reason, and I can't get to a store to get my interfacing, what you could do instead is you could run a piece of cotton lawn, or you could run a piece of cotton and just baste it in place along the fold of your garment or your project, and then baste it here. Then when you go to do your buttonhole, you can go ahead and test that and see if that turns out nice. I am such a tester. I've just learned over the years the extra 10 minutes I spend on testing can potentially save my entire project because I don't mess it up. Okay, so one of the things we need to show you is that Bernina gives you 2 different feet you can use to do buttonholes, but we're going to use this one today, and it's called an automatic buttonhole foot. The number on it is 3A. This will work on any of the 3 series machines all the way up through your 880 and 880 plus machines. So this is really a wonderful foot. Dave, if you can get in here for a second, I'm going to set this down so I'm not wiggling it. But what I want to show everybody, I'm going to see if I can get a pointer here. Okay, there is this little slider right here in red, but there's a little red mark on the foot, on the interior of the foot. So what you can do is you can say, okay, I'm going to use a buttonhole or a button that looks, my goodness, maybe I need to pick one just slightly bigger so it doesn't fall in there on me. Okay, say that's the button I'm going to use. My little marks on my foot start right here. And what I would do is set this down and I would move my slider just past the size of the button itself. And then that should give me a buttonhole big enough to fit over there. Now, if you have a really thick buttonhole, go ahead and slide it down a little bit more and give yourself some more room. So today, what we're gonna do is we're gonna do this long of a buttonhole, and I'm gonna put it over here like I do any of my feet. We'll just put it on the machine. I'm going to finish threading up my little, if I can find the start of my thread. Let's put the glasses on. It is time to be able to see. There we go. There we go. All right, so whenever you thread your sewing machine, you always make sure that that foot is up so that your tension discs are open. So then, and what we're going to do is we're going to put our, well, that doesn't work like that. I am very spoiled. I've forgotten. There we go. We should, we'll see. Oh, nope, our buttonholer is broken on this machine. I'm going to have to get my handy dandy technician to go ahead and fix that buttonholer for me.
Needle threader?
Needle threader, that's what I meant. Thank you. Not the buttonholer. The buttonholer will work just fine. So I am running my thread down the little opening for my buttonhole foot, and then I'm going to hit on this machine. I hit the 0 down here, and it starts my it's going to be for number 10, which is a buttonhole. And you can see along this edge, it's got a little blinking light. That means it's going to do the left-hand side of my buttonhole. And I can adjust the size of the legs of my buttonhole by making this a little bit bigger. This is my stitch width regulation. So I've just made that as big as it can be. Now I'm going to, normally what you would do is you put a mark wherever the start of your buttonhole is. And we're going to, because I don't have something to mark it real handy, we're going to pretend that that's what I did. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start sewing down the side, and I'm going to watch my 2 little red lines. And then I'm going to hit my reverse button. And now what's happened is it's remembered the length of this whole procedure, and it's sewing a buttonhole for me. Now, Dave, come back up here to the screen and show them what it says on the screen. See where it says auto? So now what I can do is I can go ahead and I can look at my buttonhole, and I can go back and get that little button that I had. And look at that. It looks like it's going to work for that buttonhole. But what I would normally do is I'd cut open this buttonhole and make sure that it is going to be big enough for my project right here. Hey, Denise, can you get me a set of scissors? A pair of scissors. That's what I meant to say. It didn't come out right. Today's all been a little freaky. There's some in that basket over there, I'm sure. Okay, so what I want to show you though is now what I can do is I can put my foot down, I can press my go button. Now this would be where I'd want my next buttonhole to be. And watch what the machine's going to do. By the way, I'm not touching anything because it's a small piece of fabric and it's guiding it just fine. But if I had a bigger garment, that's fine. If I had a bigger garment, I might be a little more careful with it. But with this, it's not going to go anywhere on me. Okay, so it finished up the buttonhole. I didn't have to hit anything. And then what I want to show you, which is really, really cool, I'm going to take and cut these apart so you can see just honest engine. They are identical. Look at that.
Bernina pointed out too the fact that don't forget the great buttonhole cutter accessory from Bernina.
Oh, that's right. That is a wonderful tool, and I actually use that all the time. But look at that. I have enough room in here between my little, these are called beads. Each side of the buttonhole, it's called beads. And look at that. There's room in between there. I can go ahead and cut that. And what Bernina was just talking about is this accessory item right here. It has a little wedge-shaped cutter in it here. We can probably take this out of the box and make it make much more sense. I've been thrown off my game today a little bit. I don't like it when we don't start on time. So what you get is a little wooden block, and you get a metal chisel, and they have a nice safety cover on there because this is really sharp. And what it will do is you would put this on here and you can cut. And usually what I'll do is I'll use this wooden block. You could use your rotary cutter mat, but this is really pretty intense and it cuts really well. And so what you might, if you did it on your rotary cutter mat, it might actually cut through the mat. So I'm not sure you want to do that, but it can, see, it will go right here, and you just, the fabric is very thick, you might use a little hammer, but if it's just a matter of that you're going ahead and cutting between there with a normal piece of like a top fabric or a lightweight dress fabric, you probably don't need to hammer it. You probably have enough strength in your hand to just go through there. But the idea of that wedge is so that you don't cut those little threads on either side of the buttonhole, because that's actually a really common, very annoying thing to do. So for those of you out there who have, you know, a simpler Bernina, this buttonhole foot, what I'm trying to point out is you can use this. And if you've not tried it out, this is a really good time to get out your machine and figure out how to use that buttonholer. It's super simple, as I just showed you. I just hit the buttonhole stitch, and I hit the reverse button when I get down to the end of what I want my buttonhole to look like. We're going to go over on 790 and do the same thing, because I want to show you one very cool thing that the higher end machines can do, and that you would maybe want to. Unfortunately, this doesn't come out until you get into the 5 series machines, but it really is pretty exceptional. So let's go over to the other machine, and we'll put that stuff right there. I don't think I need anything else from over here, but let's go over to our 7. Oh, Dave, don't forget to take a picture. Guess what we have in the shop? We have a demo unit of last year's special edition 790 with the peacock front. Now, the problem is when we get a demo like this, we don't have all the gifts with purchase that they came with, but if you want something with a pretty front on it instead of just a typical 790, that's pretty amazing. So let's go ahead and let's sit down at our 790. Very kindly, Denise set this one up for me, so it is ready to sew. And the only thing I need to do is put my little thread through here. I don't have, well, maybe I do. Where's our little, I don't know where our little red boxes went. But normally what I would do is I'd have a set of tweezers over here so that I could get this. But because the 790 has higher clearance level, that was actually easier to do this time. So again, we have a piece of fabric that has interfacing on it, and then what we're gonna do, do we have one of those white chalk markers in one of those boxes? That I don't know. Yeah, this stuff right here.
Okay.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do, just so you can see it, we are going to say, let's pretend that we want our buttonhole right there. This is, and usually when I mark for buttonholes, I mark all the way down the front of my garment. Usually buttonholes are approximately 5/8 of an inch away. I think this was 3/4. This would be more typical in a jacket, would be 3/4, but typically you're going to look at 5/8 inches from the edge, and that's where you would put your buttonhole. And see that cross mark right there? What I can do when I go to do a buttonhole, I can go ahead and put my needle right there, and we're going to put our foot down. There we go. And then we're going to say we're going to do a button that's that size. So again, remember there's a little red mark at the top. That's my top of my buttonhole. And this little red marker is supposed to be for where I want the bottom. And I only need that for the very first buttonhole I make, because the machine will remember it after that, and then it doesn't really matter if you accidentally hit that slider. It's not going to make any difference. The machine can't see the slider. That's a guide for you. So what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and you're going to, we're going to do one thing here, Dave. Look at the machine. It's taken and has it all set up right here. We're going to do one thing. Now look at this button right here. That is the opening for the buttonhole itself. And you can make that bigger. And notice that on here, it's got 2 little dials. That means I can use either one of these. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this really wide so that you can kind of see the difference. And what happened on the screen here is it did get a little wider. We're going to do one more thing. We're going to make the legs just a little bit wider. So we're going to do that. And we've got that set up really well. Now it's ready to record. So we're just going to go ahead and we're going to start sewing. And this time I'm using my foot control. Now I'm going to slow down here so that I can get right to that mark. And see, I can stop right there, and then I can hit my reverse button. And then I can either use my foot control, or then I can hit my on button. And the machine knows what's going on because the darn thing's smarter than me. Now look at the front. That shows you what the buttonhole's supposed to look like. So we're going to go ahead and cut our thread. And look at that. Look how wide that is right there. So if you have a really thick fabric, you would want to go ahead and open up that area a little bit more, because if you've ever made a buttonhole on a really thick fabric, what typically ends up happening is those beads, those right and left legs of the buttonhole, tend to get smushed up against each other. And so one of the really cool features of your Bernina is that you can, on the higher end models, you can change that buttonhole so that that opening is a little bit bigger, and it makes it easier to cut this without cutting those threads. That's one of the most aggravating parts for me, is I can't tell you how many times I've gone and made a buttonhole, and then when I cut it, I have gone ahead and cut these little threads right here. So having the ability to make those legs further apart so that that's not such an issue is really wonderful. So we made our test, and if we like it, and by the way, if you don't like it, what you can do is you can either clear out the whole buttonhole and start over again, or you can just go ahead and make a couple of changes. For example, if I think my threads are too tight right here on the right and left leg, what I can do is I can change my buttonhole stitch length, and look at the screen now. Look how far apart they are now. Now, I typically wouldn't want a buttonhole to look like that, but there may be some instance where that's what you do want, or it's stacking up too much. Those threads are stacking up too much. And so now what I could do is I can go ahead and say, okay, my next buttonhole right here, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to put it in the middle of my markings. I usually make my marks pretty big so that I don't have any problems seeing. And what I used today was a white wax marker, but this is only for demonstration purposes so that you can see it. Typically, I would not use this wax on cotton. So I just want you to know that that is the case. So what we're going to do is just hit the on button. We're going to make sure that that stays on my line. Look at that. It's going to sew the same size buttonhole it did before as far as the length goes, but now what it's going to do is those beads on the right and left side, they're further apart. So that's how it goes and sews this for you. So, and if I really love this buttonhole and I want to save it for another time, you know the Berninas have a place where you can save it. And what you can do is say, I want to put my buttonhole right in one of my folders. Ta-da! Now I can go back and I can have that. I can do something else. I can come back to my favorites. I can take it out of my folder and I can say, oh, that's the one I want. And there it is. It set it up again for me. So pretty awesome features to be able to have. And really nice way to get your buttons all done. And by the way, today, now that I have a Bernina, and I've done this on a 330 or a 335 or a 5 series or on a 7 or an 8 series, I've been able to make an entire line of buttons on a shirt. And by the way, yes, today I'm wearing a shirt I made, and I can make those buttonholes now in less than, I mean, like 6 buttonholes down the front of a shirt in 10 minutes. And I mean that sincerely. They are so simple. But I always make a test on the fabric I'm using. You see how wonderfully these turned out. Both the fronts and the backs look absolutely wonderful. And so what you'll want to be able to do is your next project, see how wide that opening is. Now, on this fabric, that might not make sense because you'll end up with little threads hanging out here. But on a coat, that would actually take up the room because it would be heavier. And you guys know I like to sew coats. Okay, so let's